morning. Thanks, Kit. If the slides go out, don't worry. I didn't rehearse this, so we're good. I kind of wanted to start with another terrible joke, which is this speech is rated R for nomads. It's real. We're going to talk about real things, and judging by the response yesterday in some of the panels, these are it's kind of an uncomfortable topic. We're going to talk about what happens if bad things happen. And I just want you guys to know it's okay. We're going to have a plan. So my big thing was, why did I want to do this talk? Was it just, I wanted to come to 7-7? I was like, no, you know what? Something recent very much happened to me where I bought a house, and I had to trust my realtor. I had to trust all of these people that are in part of that process. And I was like, oh my God, this is what my clients feel like. Like, they trust me to do these things for them. And what a terrifying experience this is. And I felt very vulnerable because I didn't know what I was buying. And it's a large sum of money, and you're just like, okay, but explain this more to me. So I want you guys to kind of get a feel for insurance in such a way today that you're a little more confident about how you're buying it. That's the purpose. And of course, to kind of figure out that you need a plan. I think you all need to know what a catastrophe looks like and how you can protect yourself from it. I also want you guys to feel like it's not so confusing anymore, and that you can move forward with confident decisions. So we're going to talk about the best insurance for nomads. We're going to talk about other types of protection. We're going to talk about claims, which is not so beautiful. And then we're going to really specialize on fine print. So I think to understand insurance, you need to really understand what insurance is supposed to do. And insurance is supposed to protect you from catastrophic financial failure. So whether it's health insurance, which protects you from very large hospital bills, or other types of insurance that protect your business, that's the mindset you need to have into this. A lot of people that I meet say, oh, well, I need insurance to cover me from every medical expense. Well, as nomads, this doesn't make sense to me. Why would we be covered for things that could be like $5 or $10, prescriptions or doctor's visits? What we actually need to be insured for are things like if you break your leg, if you need surgery, if your spouse has cancer, things like that. So throughout the rest of this talk, remember, I'm not talking about your wellness checkups. I'm talking about these very, very large bills that can come up. Okay, so just to make it real for a second, I wanted to show you the 2015 rates for certain procedures, varying by country. So as most of you know, Thailand is kind of the cheapest, and it's also very high quality. I would also say that Colombia is around the same price structure. So if you wanted to have procedures done in Colombia or Thailand, it's both very good medical. It's also very, very cheap. But you start to get into these ranges right here, right? They're kind of scary. My boyfriend had acute pancreatitis in Thailand. We were in a hospital for a week, and it ended up being about $60,000 because he was there. So yes, like breaking your leg, you could probably cover. Getting sick, you can probably cover. But there are medical procedures that maybe you're not aware of or you don't hear about too frequently that are quite substantial. So when we talk about insurance, these are the things that I'm talking about, these very, very high things. These are also some very real statistics. I know, just have a deep breath. It's okay. The one that I think is really critical is just 1 in 4 of the 20-year-olds today will become disabled before retirement age. So what that means is you're not going to be in a wheelchair, but you're not going to be able to work maybe in the same capacity that you did today. And I don't think we talk enough about what happens when that happens. What happens when you can't walk away from your business? I don't know how many of you have these built-in contingencies. Can you walk away from your business for a whole week or a month or even a year? Is it that resilient? Or do you actually need to be that hands-on? So when you walk away from this talk today, I want you to really think about what you can do for yourself and your business that can protect you if something like this happens. Average cancer treatment is like 4 months. I also need you to think about where you're going to go. And that's really important because most of my clients before are expats. So they're like, 65. They moved down to Panama or Costa Rica. And they're like, well, I'm just going to die here. It's like, okay, well, great. But what happens when you get sick? Do you have support? Do you have a partner that's going to take care of you? If you have something happens like Natalie, she got hit by a bus, incapacitated from the waist down, couldn't really walk. Who's going to take care of you during that time? Are you going to have treatment in your home country where you have a support system? Or are you going to try to have that treatment in the country that you're in? These are longer term strategies than we're really used to talking about. This is much longer than like your marketing plan for the next year or your goals. This is about really thinking about, I'm going to hit a certain age and I'm going to want to continue my lifestyle. What tools can I have today that are going to protect me and the way that I want to live my life? All right, so based on what I know, I'm going to break down the best insurance on 2 categories. So the first category is going to be, there's short-term insurance. And short-term insurance is typically what I find most nomads have, and that's fine. It can work for everybody, but it doesn't necessarily work for all. With short-term medical insurance, this is like your world nomads. It is technically categorized in 2 ways. There is primary travel insurance, travel medical insurance, and then there's secondary. That's in the legal fine print. So secondary is travel medical insurance that assumes that you have long-term health insurance in your home country, whether it's your passport country or the country where you spend most of your time. Then primary travel insurance requires you to have no insurance in your home country at all. What I think is really misleading about travel medical insurance is they don't talk about this anywhere. You literally have to read like some of the fine, super fine print, and sometimes it's not even there. So most of the cheap plans that you end up seeing on the internet that are advertised that are like $20 for a month, that's your secondary travel insurance. This means that they, as the insurer, assume that you have insurance in your home country. And how this works is, if you get diagnosed with something that requires long-term care or that they suspect you should go home for treatment for, they don't pay. They just go, oh, yeah, we'll pay for your plane ticket home. Well, if you're an American and you don't have insurance in your home country, you're kind of fucked. So again, this is great for some nationalities. I'm going to go over this on my next slide. But just know, if you're going to buy travel insurance, you need to make sure if it's primary or secondary. You also need to make sure and ask if you can buy the insurance after you've left your home country. You also need to ask them if you need a return plane ticket in order for that insurance to be valid. So if I start here on, like, let's say Christmas Day, and I'm an American, and I buy secondary travel insurance because I have insurance in the US, and I go to Mexico, but then I plan to go to Costa Rica and Peru, and I have no expectation of a return ticket, and I get to Peru, and I still don't have a return ticket, and I try to claim for that insurance, they can say, no, we're not going to pay because you didn't have a return ticket home. They don't make this very well advertised. So don't feel like you didn't know this and you didn't do your due diligence. These are things you have to call and ask them. And it's very frustrating to me that they're not so straightforward. The other thing that you can do, and this is where I have worked in the last 5 years, is you purchase private international insurance. And what that does is it's a blanket policy. It covers you in your home country. It covers you everywhere else in your area of coverage. This type of insurance is actually more of your long-term strategy because it's going to include things like hospital cover. It can cover prescriptions. It can cover dental. It can cover maternity. It can cover your gynecological exams, everything in between. It covers like long-term care, hospice care, things for, end-of-life care. Those are the kinds of things that it covers. It's a lot more expensive. I'm not going to lie. It's not terribly cheap. But the difference is it's going to cover you year after year after year. And if you get diagnosed with a condition during that time, and after a year you renew that policy, guess what? They're still going to cover you for that. And that's not always the case with travel insurance. And then the newest one, I was quite excited about the newest one, which is Safety Wing. I think it's a great product, first and foremost. I think it's a young product, but it has a really great target market, which is us. And they're trying to do things that are very different. But again, this is not always a perfect solution for everybody. So they don't cover cancer coverage, which is not a long-term solution. They also, after a year of being on the plan, it resets. So if you were treated for anything in the first year, it's not going to be covered in the second year. This might be okay for some people, but it's not okay for others. So you need to kind of ask yourself, what do I need and what assets do I have in my home country? Okay, so talking about Americans real quick, we kind of get the brutal end of the stick on this. So American domestic providers, the ones that I've named here, they will cover you internationally. The problem is they don't actually pay any money outside of the US. So they'll reimburse you for the $20,000 medical bill, but they're not actually going to pay that money abroad. So keep that in mind. Have a credit card that has like a super high limit if you're going to go with that strategy. If you aren't, and you're just going to get private international coverage, great. But don't feel like you need to buy coverage to include the US. Most policies have a specific clause, and it says they will cover you outside of your area of coverage for a certain amount of time. And that's built into your policy. So it'll cover you for a trip to go back to the US if anything happens to you while you're there. But it won't cover you if you wanted to go back to the US for treatment. That can save you like $1,000 a year, easily. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to pretend to be an EU citizen and understand this, but I did write a slide. So from what I understand and the research that I did, the Europeans have the EHIC card, which is quite brilliant. So if you are in a European country and you're a resident, and I think there's some tax stipulations, I'm not really quite sure what they are, but essentially if you qualify for national health care in your home country, and you move to another EU country or you travel there, you can use this card to get treatment. There's some stipulations about it and how you can use it, but essentially it's a really good fit for most Europeans, but it doesn't cover you outside of the EU. So if you go to Thailand, if you go to Vietnam, there's no coverage there. They're not gonna like, oh, it's okay, we have nationalized healthcare, we'll pay for it. No, 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 you're on your own. So make sure that you get some sort of insurance for when you leave the EU. That's the most important. I did look to see what would happen at Brexit with this card, and they said, we're not really sure, but in 2020 we'll let you know. And I was like, fair enough. And yeah, if you're German or Dutch, you actually get really good travel insurance. So look into that, and I think there's probably a couple of other countries too. Okay, who wants to have a kid in the next 10 years? Okay. Cool. All right, so there's a couple of you. This is a really interesting problem for nomads. So if you're an EU citizen, you can use your EHIC card to have a baby in a different country as long as, and this is tricky, you can prove that you didn't go to that country to have the baby. Now, most people would look at that statement and say like, whoa. So, and this is quite interesting. So in legal, like non-legal terms, what that means is they don't want somebody from like a poor EU country going to a richer EU country just so that baby would have a new passport. That's the moral of the story. So if you can prove that you were working there, or if you have family there, or you can justify why you're in that country and having that baby, they're totally cool with it. They don't even care. For Americans, again, we're working on it, but I do know if you move back to the US and you are pregnant, they do have what's called emergency Medicare for maternity, and it enrolls you within 30 days, and they'll get you on your feet so you can do your prenatal. If you buy private insurance, the long-term stuff, there's always a 1-year waiting period, always. So if you find yourself pregnant, you can't buy private international insurance to cover that pregnancy. Some of the products are really great for maternity, but you have to kind of plan in advance, which most of us do, but you need to make sure that you do kind of think this like a little bit more forward. And then you can actually buy maternity packages from hospitals. Most people do that once they're already pregnant. Okay, so these are the other types of insurance that most people don't talk about. I'm going to go over these kind of quickly, but I'll take questions later. So you can buy life insurance. That protects you if you die. So let's say, for example, you're the sole earner in your relationship. You would want to make sure you have life insurance because when you die, your partner needs money to kind of like get their shit together. A lot of times people, when their spouse dies, they like grieve really hard. Like they lay in bed for 6 months and don't do anything. And so life insurance makes sure that they have time to kind of get their assets in order. You can buy income protection, which I think is probably what I think most of you should consider. It protects you against any sort of long-term illness or any sort of disability and you can't work. So let's say you get dementia when you're like 45 because you've been staring at computer screens. This would pay you 75% of your proven income until you turn 65. And this is what when I talk about like long-term strategies, this is really important. Critical illness is very similar. Business, when we talk about events, making sure that you're insured so if somebody gets hurt, you're not negligent, they can't sue you. And then your assets, which is like your computer or something relevant to your business. Okay, I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes. So I wanted to show you guys what these rates are. These are no specific insurance companies, and you shouldn't worry about it. But I wanted you to see what happens when you have two red companies and how these prices can be similar. So this company only offers $200,000. The deductibles are always $500 or $250. But this one's $58 and this one's $50. And you're like, but it's like the same thing. Why is it that they can be the same price, but the benefits are very similar? So what happens in this situation, you have to ask yourself certain questions about the type of insurance company. So first and foremost, are they regional? Like, is it a regional insurer that only covers like Southeast Asia or South America? Or are they global? How big is the company? Who processes their claims? A lot of really cheap insurance companies sell the claims processing to another company, and that company gets paid on whether or not they approve or deny a certain percentage. Those companies are nightmares to work with, by the way, because all they want to do is deny and say, oh no, we can't pay this because you didn't translate your medical records, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do this. This is where you get into like paperwork hell. So make sure you ask about that specifically. You want to ask about who's doing their medical evacuation. Is it done in-house? You want to ask if they cover pre-existing conditions. Sometimes they don't. You want to ask about how technologically savvy they are. Are you going to have to physically mail something, or is everything submitted online? That's a really good question to ask. And how long have they been an insurance company? If they've been an insurance company for less than 5 years, be very, very careful. Very careful. In insurance, too cheap to be true is very real. Very real. If you guys have ever been on Ryanair, you know it's too cheap to be good, right? Okay, so think about this. If you're going to spend like $3,000 on flights a year, make sure that you're spending a proportional amount on your insurance. It's really worthwhile. Just for budgeting purposes, I wanted you guys to see what disability and income protection would cost on an average. So if you guys were making $100,000 a year, these are your age bands, and this is how much it would cost you for the year. It's not terribly expensive, and when you have peace of mind, it kind of makes sense, or it can make sense. Okay, so if you do purchase insurance, and you do have to use it, which I really don't hope that you do, because it's kind of like a two-way street. I want you to be healthy, but I need you to know how to do it. So for health insurance, you always need a medical report from the doctor. This is how you were treated, what you were treated for when the symptoms started. Some insurance companies are going to ask you to have this translated. Some won't. Know in advance. For life and illness, you just need to have a doctor report on the diagnosis. Then you'll send it to the insurance company. For travel, this one's really tricky to claim for. You need to know how long you were delayed or what was in your baggage that was lost. So if you're going to claim against that. And then finally, for electronics, this one I cannot stress enough, by the way. Have your serial numbers. If you lose your phone and you try to claim it, or if you get mugged and you don't have the serial number for your phone, they're not going to pay you, flat out. They're also not going to pay you if you do not have the original purchase receipt or a copy of that email, and you also need a police report. So, and then the fine print. So, wrap your tools. STDs are never covered, period. That's all I have to say. Make sure you understand the exclusions for skiing. So skiing and snowboarding, you normally have to be within bounds. You can't be in the trees. I know. I'm going to let that one sink in. I'm also going to, I know, actually you guys are summer people. So the scuba diving one's really relevant. I believe it's 50 meters is all you're covered for. And you have to be certified in order for any sort of bariatric claim to be covered. If you're climbing or you're trekking, there's always an elevation limit. So you need to check what your elevation limit is. If you're getting coverage in the US, you need to ask about the PPO. So that's like the restricted network, because there's fines if you go outside of that, and it's really terrible. And then there's this terrible, terrible little phrase, UCR. I hate this phrase. UCR is usual and customary charges, which basically means if your doctor in a certain country charges more than what the insurance company thinks that that doctor should be charging for that service, they're going to make you pay what they think the doctor has paid more for, or has charged you more for. So basically, make sure you get a policy that is going to cover you up to a certain limit and not just what they think that they should be paying. Sleep disorders are never covered, and waiting periods, just make sure you ask about them in advance. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Deanna. I know this is deep breaths.
I know. There's a lot to get through.
Yeah. So yes, it is.
I know, isn't it just the cutest?
Yeah. So this is a topic. We're going to do Q&As again. So get your questions ready. But for Deanna, we want to make the questions relevant to everyone. So if you've got a question like, this one time I filed a claim with World Nomads and they denied it, ask her at lunch, more general questions. So this is something, I think insurance is something a lot of us kind of just run away from, pretend we don't need to think about because we're not that old and that kind of stuff. What do you think is the biggest misconception that we nomads have about insurance?
I think, so unfortunately the way insurance is sold, it's not very easy to look online. Like you're going to get a million emails from a million different people, and that's really frustrating. So, and also, it's very hard to look at two different types of insurance and see if they're similar. So what most nomads like to do is they go, oh, well, you know what, the cheapest one just covers everything. And that's fine, again, if it works for you. But just make sure that you're keeping very much in your values that you only need to be insured for the things that you financially cannot handle. You do not need to be insured for dental, good God. But you need to be insured for things that are just massive claims. Like look at how much you have saved. If that got wiped out, what happens? Do you go home? Do you go call your parents? If you call your parents, it's fine. Just make sure you call your parents.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Awesome. All right, questions over there.
Liz.
Lots of information. I have a question about income protection.
Yes.
For most of us nomads, we can't prove our income because it varies. Even when I was freelance and working really consistently for studios, I could never get income insurance that would even close to cover it because I couldn't prove what my projected earnings were. Thoughts around that would be great.
So I don't know how long ago you were trying to do that, but normally what they ask for now is proof of your income statements from the last 2 years. So that's usually like your bank statements. So it doesn't need to say, oh, you know what, she got paid X amount of dollars every month. They'll just see that you have income that reaches a certain limit, and they'll take the median of that. Yeah. So when you purchase income protection, you assign what you're making now, and then if you later on start making more money, you can increase it. But they're always, once you claim, they're going to need to see those 2 years of bank records. And then that's how they'll prove that you actually can be paid out that such sum. Yeah.
There we go. Lewis and Sarah.
My question's totally gone out of my head because I was listening to what you were saying. Oh yeah, no, I do remember. So you were saying that like a lot of cheap insurance is bad, and then like it's hard. You put like your tables up of like all these like the kind of stats or technical differences. Is there like, do you have a resource for actually seeing like how many times like people will fill a claim or stuff like that, for actually seeing the quality of insurance rather than just the technical stats?
So I personally can't like give that out, but my company, because the way that we work, we are able to get that information. So it's weird because you can't really, well, I guess you could call an insurance company and say like, hey, by the way, how much of your claims percentage do you get paid? You do want to ask what their claim processing time is on average. Most of them, in order to be liquid, they pay most of it, but like 20% of your premium is actually towards marketing costs. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't say all cheap insurance is bad. That's not true. What I would like to really stress is that you need to understand the loopholes of cheap insurance to make sure that it's going to be the right fit for you. Because we've all assumed that one product is great, but then it doesn't necessarily fit everybody's like pocket. So yeah. Hi.
We'll get to Sandra. I see you. We'll get you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the founders of Safety Wing. So
Yes.
thanks so much. Thanks so much for the mention. We are working on also creating a comprehensive international health insurance like you're on. So I was wondering if you could describe your perfect international health insurance for the nomadic
For nomads,
lives.
yeah. So what I love about Safety Wing, I spoke with their CEO about 6 months ago, and what I thought was really interesting is how he priced it. And I said, how did you get the pricing that you did? Because I know, looking at what insurance sells, what the value of that insurance is actually at. And so they had like this really great cost for benefit analysis. And it was funny because they said, well, if you take out cancer coverage, it's actually quite cheap. Yeah, well, that's one of the factors. It's also about target demographics, and there's other certain things that it covers. But with long-term products, specifically for nomads, I think it needs to have a higher deductible because it needs to be more of a catastrophic-like plan. I also think it needs more wellness protection, and I think it needs more like chiropractic. What I think is really unfortunate about our lifestyle is we feel like we're super healthy, but we actually sit all day. And that's really hard on our bodies. So I feel like insurance needs to take better protections against us preventing long-term illness. And most insurance companies are not willing to make that transition. And that's really unfortunate. Oh, wait.
We got Sandra up here, and then one more, and then I got to ask you guys to find Deanna at lunch. I know we got lots of insurance questions. This is great. Sandra?
I have actually a positive feedback to insurances because last year I broke my leg during surfing. Some of you know the story. And actually, I think my insurance would not cover that because then I was reading that in the fine print and it says extreme sports, but maybe surfing is not one of those. And they did everything so quick. It's the European insurance company.
Yeah.
So I think everybody living in Europe can use this insurance, and I paid 180 for 1 year coverage. And I mean, they flew an Austrian doctor to me, to Lombok, to an island. He brought me home, and yeah, they treated me very well. That was insane.
Yeah.
I never saw something like that. And I was not insured in Austria, and it was not a problem. I mean, I need to pay 100 euro, I think, but that's nothing. I mean, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a positive feedback I can give, at least when you're living in Europe. And I know several people who had a good experience.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so while she's passing this down, I will say this. It's really frustrating because I feel like we have great stories like this where it's like, oh yeah, my cheap insurance did great things. It's like, sometimes that's going to happen. But sometimes the long term is the size of the claim is what's relevant to the insurance company. So her broken leg's probably like a couple €100, no big deal. It's when you start to get into like surgeries that they start to go, well, we need to make sure you're following the letter of the law. And that's where it gets frustrating. Okay, all right.
I have a question about short-term secondary insurance, which is the type that I buy,
Yes.
and trying to understand the different benefits involved and like how much coverage you need. Because the one that I buy, there's like 5 different plans, and they go up to different values. The one that particularly confuses me is liability. Like the cheap one gives you $1 million criminal liability, the top one gives you like $10 million criminal liability. I'm like, I don't intend to be liable for anything. How do I know whether I need
Planning on breaking $1 million with this
Yeah, okay.
I don't know whether I need $10 million. Like I just,
Right.
I don't know.
So this is a really interesting thing, and I'm gonna have to take Sam's kind of like legal disclaimer here and say like, by the way, this is not particular advice that I'm giving to anybody. You cannot come back at me and be like, but you said it's 7 and 7. I will say this. I think the most important thing to look at when you're doing travel insurance is medical evacuation. You need more than $50,000 per incident. That's like number one. Most medical evacuations on short-term travel insurance is like $500,000, so you're like pretty good there. The medical itself is going to range depending on where you are. So they offer $50,000, which I think is like, no, like don't buy that one. That is like the one you don't buy. Then there's $100,000, $500,000, and $1 million. If you're going to the States, you need $1 million plus. If you're in like Mexico, I'd go for $500,000. If you're in Thailand or Medellin, you can go for $100,000. That's fine. But it also depends on the length of your trip. And I think it's okay to go with $100,000 for the personal liability. I wouldn't say anything more than $50,000. I think they include it on there just to kind of bump up the price a bit. Also, with that, you can always put in, if you want, you can put in your travel cost at 0 and just buy the medical. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Last question.
Hi. So you mentioned preventative services, and
Yes.
I thought of mental health. And so is it possible to find plans out there that cover, that are more comprehensive plans? Like, and this might be more for Americans that don't have
Right.
insurance in their home country because it's super expensive.
Okay, so I hope you took note of that because that's really important. I do feel like mental health is super important. However, not every insurance company feels the same way. There are some insurance companies that have very good mental health benefits, and there are others that are like, what, you have mental health issues? No, those are mental issues, not health issues. And they do really like divide them. So if that's something that's really important to you and you want to set that up, you need to look at the cost-benefit analysis of taking an insurance plan that protects you for your health or your mental. And sometimes you might be able to find a therapist that's cheap enough to pay out of pocket than it is to have it included on your insurance. But again, mileage would vary based on who you are, what country you're from. There is no one-term answer for everybody. So.
Awesome. Well, everyone give Deanna a big round of applause. Thank you for answering so many questions.